Hey everybody, you ready for some brutal truth? Today we've got a great episode. We'll be talking about something that very few people talk about, and that's getting a great headhunter on your side. I talk about it quite a bit through the Career Advice podcast, and a lot of the sales questions come in about career. More come in about career than actual selling. And it could be for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of bad sales jobs out there. There's a lot of really hard sales jobs out there, and you may have one of them. But we really need to have somebody on our side, somebody who is our advocate, intermediary, somebody who is our sports agent, our Ari Gold from Entourage. And this was a game changer in my career. Why? Because I heard about the best jobs before anyone else did. I shared what was going on and what I heard in the industry with a handful, maybe 2, 3 great recruiters throughout my career. And I really kind of incentivized them to have my back. Give them kind of a window of my level of interest, my level of happiness, what I'd like to do next. And they would call me because they had rapport with me. They knew I would take their call. They knew I would call them back. And too many reps would do just the opposite. They would ignore them, send it to voicemail. And I still see this today. And there are a lot of mediocre recruiters out there too. I get it. There's a lot of people just trying to plug anybody into an interview slot just so they can fill up the manager's day. I get it. But that's why you have to build the relationships with them. They're part of your ecosystem. And they know the rep of the language, the rapport and the reputation of the company that you're interviewing with. So they'll give you some insights that you won't get on Glassdoor. Because Glassdoor is usually, like most review things, it's all set up or disgruntled people. So you tend to get the 5-star and the 1-star. What you really want to do is find the 4-star, the people who say, okay, this is the good part, this is the bad part. The manager's kind of a hard ass, but they treat you really good. They like you to make money, but they want you to work your butt off. Or, he's just a pencil pusher. All of this reputation stuff is stuff that you'll never find out until you take the job. And then it's too late. You're kind of committed. So today I've got somebody who runs a recruiting agency, a very large one, very successful one. And we're going to be talking about the state of sales careers right now. So from both a selling standpoint and a career strategy standpoint, this is a critical element in your success, because if you get into the wrong company or with the wrong manager, it doesn't matter how good the company and the product and you are, it's going to be really hard. Anybody who's had a bad comp plan or a terrible territory or, just the quota was just unrealistic or you didn't get the help and the support that you need will recognize this. But before we get in the interview, I want to give everybody a big thank you. The people who have connected up with me on LinkedIn, telling people about the podcast, the numbers are cranking. I really appreciate it. And when you support the podcast by sharing my content on LinkedIn or telling somebody, it just warms my little heart. This cold old sales guy just gets all warm when I see that. So I really appreciate it. And it really does matter to me. And I really consider it, a real thank you. And as part of that, I've got an upcoming course on designing sales questions. The idea is to really give you 6 to 12 fantastic questions that are going to get people curious, interested, and take action instead of tell me about yourself or it depends. Have you ever heard that? That's all I hear. So podcast listeners are going to get a discount on that. The current courses are going to go up in price shortly, probably by the end of November. So please get locked in and get all the benefits, because I'm offering now one-on-ones. This is just you and me talking about your deal anonymously. It does get recorded and put into the course if you want it for free. If you want it private, I'll do that as well. You'll get a 50% discount on my time. And this is something that's really different about this. We're really building a community with these courses. And maybe courses is the wrong word, but really take a year and invest in yourself to become great at sales, to get feedback, to see what other people are doing in other industries, and to be able to, build relationships with these people and get a sense of what's working and what's not working. All the tools, all the techniques that are really crushing it today. But hey, Before we get into the interview, I want to make sure you're checking out Discover.org, ranked #1 by G2 Crowd. Why do all that research yourself? Discover.org's got it all done for you. Everything you need to know about calling and contacting somebody is there. And this week I put out the question, where do you go for research? And the few people that do research before they contact somebody all mention Discover.org. Maybe it's because of the podcast. Who knows? But you've got to be informed. You've got to be up on what they care about and what the company cares about and what they're talking about, because they don't care about you until you care about them. And the best way to show that is that you did some research, that you're talking about the things that they care about. And Nudge can help you with that as well. Did you see Nudge has now got a plug-in for LinkedIn? So you can be on LinkedIn and find out what they care about, what they're talking about on Twitter, how you're connected, who on your team might be most connected to them, to give you an intro. LinkedIn was supposed to do that, but, everybody connected with everybody, and it's just a spaghetti mess right now. Also, Co-Video. Are you using video emails yet? I'm telling you, Chrome plugins are where it's going. Okay, here we go with Sean. Hey, Sean, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Oh, hey, Brian. Tell you a story about myself. Well, my name is Sean Sykes. I am a former sales leader. Like many of the folks who'll be listening on your call here, I've led a few sales organizations for publicly traded companies. And the one interesting fact about me, I'm a Canadian. I've lived in the U.S. and in Asia. But when I was spending time in Pittsburgh, I was out with my son at a father-son hockey game, like all good Canadians. And I was the one dad not playing, and it was a total shock to all my Pittsburgh neighbors that a Canadian who didn't know how to skate. So now you can say a Canadian that can't skate or play hockey.
Oh, blasphemy.
Right? I might lose my citizenship.
I know. I grew up skating. My mother was from Canada, but I grew up in the Boston area, and we had a cranberry bog that flooded in the winter, and so it turned into a hockey rink. And some great childhood memories there. Now, how'd you get into recruiting?
How did I get into recruiting? You know what? It's like that old commercial. I liked the company so much I bought it. I didn't buy it, but I have used peak sales now for 3 of the projects I had while sales leader for other companies, and I've always been really impressed with the organization and the service they delivered. And when the opportunity arose to be the CEO here, it seemed like such a great opportunity. It's like the height of sales. It's developing and growing an organization that helps great salespeople find great companies where they can grow personally, professionally, financially. And at the same time, how do we find great companies, great salespeople that are going to allow them to achieve their goals, whether they're family owned or publicly traded?
And, we were talking a little bit, and I share this with the audience all the time, but I'd love to get your perspective on what are people missing out if they're not engaging with recruiters on both the rep side and the manager side?
Great question. And such a timely question. When we look at the markets right now, our business in Asia and Europe, like the global economy is growing at 3.2%, the U.S. economy 4.2% the previous quarter, lows in unemployment levels. Companies right now that are treating search as an event, a point in time versus a business process, are struggling, and they will continue to struggle because there is just a massive growth engine that's occurring right now. We're seeing increased Series A and B fundings and startups. We're seeing mid-market and enterprise firms creating denser coverage models and expanding. And so what ends up happening in this kind of environment, organizations that don't have a process to build pipelines and networks and proactively be thinking about their strategy to grow their team, they end up simply putting bums in seats versus how do we find top candidates, right? Literally, top candidates who are going to add value to the organization. And those that treat it like a process will be the winners in attracting that top talent and executing against their plans. So from the business side, I think that that's the one consideration. And then, to answer your question from a candidate perspective, I think oftentimes candidates just aren't aware of all of the opportunities around them. I am the most interesting man at a dinner party because I get to have conversations with all of these businesses, stadium, seating, technology companies, finance, healthcare. There's so many great companies in the U.S. right now that are innovating, that are growing, and that need great salespeople. And many times, we're talking to $100 million company, $10 million company, $1 billion company that you've never heard of. And so when candidates are in our networks, what they're being exposed to, they're being exposed to companies they might not otherwise have been aware of, great companies with great cultures and great innovations and great career paths for salespeople.
And I always tell people, I go, the worst door to walk into a company to get a job is the front door. Meaning the website, the job boards, because you're just a piece of paper. You're just an applicant. You're not known. And I've always looked at recruiters, and I've had a handful in my life that have changed my life, that got me into the best jobs at the right time, and acted more like a sports agent than a resume shuffler. They knew the manager. They knew what the manager cared about. They would coach me on the interview. They would follow up on the interview. They'd give me brutally honest feedback because they didn't make money unless they succeeded. And I don't know why more sales reps don't embrace this. I don't know if there's a shortage of great recruiters out there, or they're just unaware, or it is a time event. You don't look for a job until you need a job, as opposed to, keeping your ear to the ground and finding out, what is the next hottest thing, just in case, next year's quota is a little bit more than I should receive.
So true. Well, first of all, sports agent, what a great analogy. I'm going to go home and tell my wife that she married Jerry Maguire, and she's
Ari Gold, whichever one works better.
Or Ari Gold. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, HR might have a problem if I'm Ari Gold here, but again, you bring up a couple of interesting points, and the one thing that's interesting to me that you mentioned, it's this whole idea that salespeople are only looking for a job when they need one. And that's not always the best time to be thinking about your career path and your career development, because at that point in time, it's very opportunistic. You need medical coverage. You need a paycheck. You've got all these responsibilities. And so, again, if a salesperson is treating the search process like a point in time versus a process, they're selling themselves short. And they really need to be thinking about their career path. What are the activities and behaviors in their day that give them energy? What do they like to do? What do they want to be doing in 3 to 5 years? And working with firms like ours or other firms that are in the space, helping salespeople, develop these future paths becomes really important. The other consideration here, if you are looking at it at a single point in time, and if you haven't been doing some of that pre-work and pre-planning with a firm, then working with a firm is critical, because one of the things that we place a lot of emphasis on, we do as part of our assessment, we do a culture map and we do a profile map. And so when people are coming to us and they're looking for not just a job but the right job, by engaging in this kind of activity, we're able to very quickly identify companies that we're working with where they're going to maybe be a better fit. They're going to find it aligns more with their values, with the pieces that are important to them. And so whether you're taking a long-term approach and leveraging a firm like ours, or a short-term approach, working with a firm has its benefits versus being opportunistic, on your own, unaware, and maybe finding yourself in a role that's not going to be long-term.
And I think it's also helpful to have that third party that both people are telling the truth to, but because the manager's not telling the truth to the interview candidate, and the candidate's not really telling the truth to the hiring manager. Or, how did I do? Oh, you did pretty good. It's like,
Yeah.
But then they tell the headhunter, oh, the guy didn't close me, or, the resume's kind of a mess, or he's a job hopper, or I don't think he's technical enough. The hiring manager's most likely not going to be that direct, but they will with the recruiter.
Well, and here's the thing. They're not going to be that direct for two reasons. One, they don't have time. They've got many recs open, and they've got a lot of candidates for this particular role. And two, from a legal consideration, organizations are very careful about the feedback that they're providing. They have to be. And to your point, that's a benefit of a third party. We're here to coach and to help improve. And so we're here to support that candidate and help them understand, maybe this didn't work, and here's what we need to be doing differently for the next opportunity. The other thing I would say, and I just add to that, and it's, you talked a little bit about that job hopper. This is where context becomes so important, because working with a firm like ours, we see all sorts of people that are going to have some short stints on their resume, and being able to help a candidate understand that you're telling a story, you have to explain why, or to explain to the hiring manager why. Acquisitions happen all of the time. We see redundancy in roles. People move to be with the person they love, and then they want to be back home closer with family when they have kids. There's a level of depth and context that is a part of this whole process that, again, if you're working with the proper firm, we can be setting expectations for both parties and helping to answer those questions.
And I think that's invaluable in the hiring process. Sure. And that coaching, and managers look for certain things. They look for a certain type, and a lot of times they're looking for the wrong type, or they're looking that the interview is very different than the job they're hiring for. The interview is, for sure, it's a pretty simple sale, but there's a structure to it. They're looking for somebody to close them at the end, that they're comparing that little 1 hour window into your 10-year career. It's not really a fair judgment. And to have somebody else there to mitigate and mediate that process, I think, is enormously valuable.
Absolutely. Sales is interesting. And how many times have you talked to sales leaders or HR leaders or just people at a conference where they've said, we hired a person, we thought they were fantastic, and 6 months later we asked ourselves, where'd that person go? Who is that person? Because the person we've hired is not having success. We hear that a lot. Yeah. And salespeople are hard to identify. Where do you find great salespeople? Because they're not hanging out on the job boards. They're passive. They're hitting an achieving plan. They're being paid well. Their senior management has provided retention strategies and a career path. The candidates that we're interested in, they're passive for the most part. How do you assess them to determine whether or not they're strong? And many HR leaders that I talk with, they have to be generalists, because they have to be able to pick up the slack when one of their peers is away on vacation, or when the number of recs within the firm is so large that they have to help. And being able to properly assess salespeople, it's a sophisticated process. And if you understand how to do it well, and if you have proven processes and you're using science to assess these individuals, you're going to have a higher rate of success. And that's so important. Another reason why we're seeing a lot of organizations turn to third parties like ourselves to the specialists. I equate us to the Amazon of search, where we can help spin up an organization's capability to support a particular point in time where there's either a skills gap or there's just a lack of resources internally to perform the search. And so AWS, I'd steal a page from their book.
And how do you feel when you hear these reports that 80% of the sales jobs are going away in 5 years? I mean, I don't know how long you've been in this space, but I've been in it a long time, and I've been hearing it ever since I got into it. And just the opposite has happened. I think there's more sales jobs in one city today than there were in the whole U.S., when I started.
Yep. Let me tell you a story. Back in the late 90s, I'm going to date myself. I had my first job. I learned how to sell. I worked for Xerox, and I went to the Xerox sales training school. I was mentored for months before I actually had to carry a quota. Best training in my life. A fantastic organization for that. And one of the gentlemen who worked in the office at the time, he was in charge of paper sales for the federal government. And there was all this talk as we rolled out the first digital printing solutions for Xerox. Would it become the paperless office, and paper was going to disappear? And at the time, we were actually promoting, that was our tagline. It was the paperless office. And I can tell you that this gentleman, Rui, he ended up being one of the top salespeople and just blowing his number out the next 5 years because we printed more paper. With more paper, we sold more paper than we did with traditional copiers. And same thing with sales. The more we move to these digital marketing platforms, the more innovation we see, the Internet of Things. It doesn't matter. We're just seeing growth in the sales profession as a result of all these advances. The exact opposite of some sort of contraction.
And there's also probably a paradox in which creates a market for you guys, in that the salespeople who are looking for jobs are most likely not the A players. The A players are the passive people who are crushing their number at the company they're at. They may not be psyched about the company or the manager or, how they're being treated. But, when they don't actively go look because they got ex-managers trying to hire them, their reputation precedes them, people are coming to them. So, I mean, I'm trying to form a question out of this. It's more like the observation that, the people that are going to go and come to the company through the job board aren't going to be the A players. They're going to be the B and C players. And
so true.
Too many of your customers probably think they can manage them up. And that's hard.
Yep. A good friend of mine is the assistant GM for the Jays, and we're having a talk one day this summer, and we were just talking about ceilings and looking at an individual's ceiling. What's their ability level? What's their future value? And when you start to think about MLB, it's abundantly obvious as we're scouting these teenagers, and we're trying to understand what's their future potential, so that we can be building out a system that allows us to have success at the ultimate level. It's so critical. Now the Jays aren't, it's not part of the Boston LA World Series this year, but I will tell you they have a great ability to I'm just giving him the gears if he's listening to this. They have a great ability to pick future talent, and when you think about sales organizations, they have churn rates depending on what you read from various organizations. The churn rates ranging somewhere around 20 to 30%. I think the number I hear often is 28. Think about the value if you have an organization that has a sophisticated ability, networks of top performers, and not just average or any performer, but top performers that are a cultural fit with your organization. So if you bring them on board, they've got the right profile, they've got the right psychometric DNA, so these innate character traits that we know lend themselves to a high degree of success. If we find those people and bring them in as a BDR or an SDR, so many companies I talk to in California or in Boston, they're looking at the roles thinking, hey, it's $50,000 a year. If it doesn't work out, what's the real cost to me? Well, the real variable cost is the recruiting cost, the $50,000 plus all of the fixed costs we had to pay them through medical and coverage. But more importantly, it's the opportunity cost. It's the territory that wasn't developed, or the future account executive. That person is in your farm team, and they're not adding value to these future roles they're going to take on. So when you ask the question, the observation is, what is the value of just simply hiring salespeople and thinking versus knowing you have top performers? It's the difference between being Oracle, Salesforce.com, companies where they have sales-focused leaders, versus just an average company that's going to get by.
It's trying to chase them. Yeah. Now, what are those elements, not just their performance? Let's say that their performance is at the A level. What are those characteristics that you're hearing most often from hiring managers?
So it depends. There's different sales roles and different profiles lend themselves to different roles. But what I can tell you, universally, there's a few characteristics that are important to us. One of the things I always used to say when I ran teams are and I looked at candidates, are you smart? Are you coachable? And are you intrinsically motivated? So we need to know if you're driven. Are you driven? I can't teach drive. No sales manager can teach that. It exists or it doesn't. And we're not just looking for people with ambition, because lots of people have ambitions. I want a big house. I want a fast car. I want to be a boss. We're also looking for people that have a grit factor, an ability to persist in the face of adversity. Ambition without grit is not enough. You have to have both. So we look for that. We look for people, for example, in some of our technology roles, a high theoretical is important. Are you able to ingest information quickly, understand it, process it, and use it in your day-to-day work life? We're looking for people that have the power of persuasion. So there's a few roles for us, and again, for me, coachability. Are you able to work well in fluid environments? Are you able to take critique and turn that into a positive? Those are the things that we look for, and that we use science to help us measure and ensure exists or are present within that individual.
And, I always use the difference or the distinction between somebody who's coachable but doesn't need a personal trainer.
Absolutely.
Meaning somebody who can count to 12, meaning the reps on their own. Yes. But when they get the feedback, hey, you're leaning into that, you're cheating on that exercise, can take that feedback. And, sports figures or sports players get that naturally. Mm-hmm. They've got a coach, when they're playing hockey, unlike what you did, but definitely baseball, right?
Baseball for sure. Yeah,
you play baseball, sure. Right? Yeah, the coach is yelling at you the whole day, right? Wake up, pay attention, keep your eye on the ball. I mean, how many times did you hear that, right?
Hey, look, Tiger's got a coach. Usain Bolt's got a coach. LeBron spends more money than anybody on coaches to maintain a physical and mental state. I have a coach. I have a great CEO coach out of North Carolina, Robert Fish. He's amazing. Anyone who's great at their craft has a coach, because they recognize that to always be improving, you need a coach.
Right, but you don't need somebody to tell you to get up and get to work every day, right? Or you have to call it.
I sure hope not.
No, right. So that's distinction. How about the grit? How do you determine that? How do you evaluate it?
So there's a couple of different ways that we can evaluate grit. Let me give you two examples. The first way to evaluate grit, the one thing we know about top performers, they find ways to consistently overcome adversity or headwinds and hit or exceed plan. Many times we'll see salespeople that are able to come in, reach President's Club 1 year, maybe hit plan 1 or 2 years, but for an extended period of time, they're not able to hit or achieve that plan. So for me, one of the things I'm always looking for, which I think is a precursor or an indicator of grit and persistence, is the ability to succeed consistently over a period of time, because we're all going to face adversity. Sometimes reps will come into a territory that someone else built for them. They'll get a bluebird, they'll have luck. That might not have been them. But if you're consistently finding ways to hit or achieve plan, then clearly you've had to deal with adversity, and there's some level of grit. We look for grit through behavioral interview processes, and we look for grit in our some of our assessments that we're providing, some of these additional psychometric type of assessments as well.
And you're finding those effective?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're able to take those three things, and we call that our P95 assessment, and it's the P95 because we have a 95.6% success rate, in that when we ask our customers a year after someone has been working with them, would you hire that individual again for the same role? The answer is yes. And so we know that if we marry those three activities, and we do a track record verification, an in-depth behavioral interview, and we marry that with our other psychometric assessments, we know that we can, with a high degree of confidence, determine that we have the person that has that right level of drive, ambition, and grit.
Excellent. Hey, Sean, I really enjoyed this conversation. Where do people go to connect with you and learn more about your company?
Sure. If you want to learn more about our company, you can go to peaksalesrecruiting.com. We come up very high on Google, so it's easy to find us. And if people are interested in contacting me directly, it's Sykes at Peak Sales Recruiting, and that's S as in Sean, Sykes.
Hey, I hope that opened your mind. If you haven't connected up with a handful, I'd say a minimum of 3. Stay in touch with them and quit thinking about your next job as only when you need your next job. That's too late then, because we're coming up on January. Things are going to change in January. People are going to get new comp plans, new territories, new assignments, new managers even. And guess what? It may not be to your liking. It might. I hope it is. But when you want a job, the worst thing you can do is go through, the website or even a job board, because managers don't look for A players there. They look for the people that they can afford. The people who are looking for A players work with recruiters. Why? Because it's so hard to find great A players. With unemployment at 4%, A players have zero unemployment. And I hear this from my friends when they are at work for more than 2 or 3 weeks. I go, you might want to up your skills, because I was never out of work. All I had to do when things went bad, and I remember this once, I was in Denver, and my manager called me and he told me he was cutting my territory, and he wasn't happy with my performance, even though I was the top person on the team. I was like, oh, okay, so you must not like the 10th person on your team much either. And he didn't find that funny. And he was taking away, some of my cherry accounts. And I didn't like him. I didn't really like the company very well. And I just called up my buddy, and boom, I had other offers, within 2 weeks. People, you get on the market, you get connected, and I found probably what turned out to be one of the second best job of my life because of that. And had a great exit, made a ton of money, learned a lot, parlayed that into even more stuff. And I couldn't just go and call the VP of sales. You can at entry level, but at a certain level, what you want is that agent, because they can negotiate your compensation. They can tell you what the manager cares about. They'll get you super good feedback from your interview, help you decide what to do next. It's all the smartest way. So it's just word to the wise. I know this by now. Hey, I want to update you on the course. Have I done that in a while? So I've pivoted the courses to make them more engaging. Not just office hours, which is an hour-long thing every other week per course. Now I've got one-on-ones, and I'm basically taking calls from people and answering questions as needed. So you get coaching, community, and content. It's the three C's, my three pillars of success. And this isn't taught by somebody else. It's taught by me. All of it's by me. I have people arranging my time, getting guests on the show, promoting the show, but when it comes to office hours and the one-on-ones, it's me. So it's not some failed sales rep who, if they can't do, so they teach, or burnt out old grumpy man. Oh, a little grumpy, but not burnt out, helping you crush your deals. And this is the content that I've basically developed over my entire career. And the prospecting stuff, to start the conversation, get the meeting, has really evolved over the last 5 years, because what I saw was the old stuff wasn't working. You need a lot more than personalization. You need a lot more than a compelling value proposition. All that stuff has its place and its time, but the things have changed. You know this. You know the phone is a great tool, but people don't pick up anymore. Email is diminishing greatly. Social is very noisy. Referrals take a lot of effort and a lot of time. I've come up with a system that just rocks. I mean, my week, I'm booked. If I told you I was booked 10 weeks in advance, you wouldn't believe me. So I'm not going to tell you that. But it is just a machine, and I'm doing it for pennies on the dollar. I'm basically having inside reps making 1/10 because I got automation, systems, and a process that works. And you can do this. You can do it all yourself, or you can outsource it. And the technologies are not that expensive. They're pennies on the dollar. Speaking of which, check out Pipedrive. I'm working together with them on their content. So we've got an objection handling tool that's coming out, working on an approach that I have found insanely effective. So we're going to be working a lot on that. They're also asking me to find experts. So if you're an expert in, say, financial services, I've got somebody in real estate, anybody even in SaaS and technology, but in services. A lot of people are saying, hey, Brian, do some stuff on manufacturing. What I'd like to do is have you come on the show. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll connect you up with my booker. We'll get you set up on the show, because I'd love to talk through. And I've been doing a couple of these. I'd like you to be dedicated at that time, meaning like not be on your cell phone running through an airport. So if you could be at your desk and just have earbuds, and we can do a Zoom or a Skype, and just take half hour. And you've heard the interviews. It's just like that. There's no preparation. You don't have to, do any homework. That's it. I really appreciate your time and support and helping out the show. We'll see you next time at b2brevenue.com. So that's it. I really appreciate it. And please tell somebody about the podcast and let me know if I can help you in any way. Oh, and you want to hear some results from the course? Well, here you go.
I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away, because they're not really about work. Yeah. I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time. Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, So
good. Yeah.
I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point, and every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, So.
And it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony. Because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there. Right. But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital